Okay, hey, hi everyone, and welcome, Gerry. So nice to have you on this program.
Thank you for having me in.
So, Mind Talks. Mind Talks is about how I get into people's minds because my work is in the domain of the mind and how to get transformation to happen. So, just as a background, uh, Gerry, we are really looking at you because you chose a career that's so off the beaten path. As a herpetologist, as a snake expert, snake wrangler, I don't know, so many epithets have been thrown at you. But I saw one of your National Geographic series on the king cobra, and I was thinking, wow, this guy is gutsy. Number one. Number two, I thought, you know, how does one have this kind of gumption to stay with a line like this? I'm sure a lot of people would have said, "What's wrong with you, Jimmy? Don't you have a better job? You're such a smart guy. I'm sure you could have done anything. You got dad who's in business and farming and exporting pineapples and all at one time. I remember.
Yeah.
So, just tell us about your journey in a brief manner. Who is Gerry and how do we understand him from the inside?
But Ian, as far as the why I chose the line, I don't think I really chose the line as much as the line sort of chose me, because that's the only thing I ever really wanted to do. So I wasn't great in school. It didn't bring relevance to what I wanted to do. In fact, wasn't great is like putting it very mildly. I was pretty bad in school at the academic side of things. Um, I but I found myself at home and comfortable in places out in the field, even dip netting in a pond, or just hanging out by a lake somewhere, or climbing trees. And for some reason, the enigma of snakes sort of appealed to me when I was very, very young. Um, and there was no guidance back then. So, I mean, I couldn't Google anything. I couldn't. We didn't have easy access to many books. Even, I mean, there were a few. It's not the kind of line that you would find a lot of books on. Engineering and medical, there were tons everywhere. If we went to a Higginbotham's, there'd be all kinds of other books, and then there'd be one or two books that were about 150 years old in the shelves there that we, somehow managed to buy. But the so because I wasn't good in school, I sort of failed my 12th and decided that it would be better for me to lie that I had passed, which I did. And having my parents in the Middle East at that time was quite convenient. So I just said that I passed and I left.
Uh-huh.
So but I did have an inspiration in the form of Romulus Whittaker, who had sort of done. I mean, already by then, this was in the early 90s, had already done so much. And the only thing I could think of is, if he made his life, then so can I. So I landed up on his doorstep and I said, please give me a job, or don't give me a job, just let me stay. I'll do anything you want. Um, and he let me stay, fortunately. And then a few months later, gave me a job as well. So I guess finding what you really want to do and what you truly are passionate about. And I use the word passionate with not easily. It's something that needs to be carefully used. And uh, it's not like work, and it's easy to stay the course because you're doing what you want to do. All the
Right.
other things are just hurdles.
Wow. So this part of the story I didn't know. This is so fascinating. I mean, it's almost like it's out of some sort of storybook.
Yeah, so I didn't actually. I still don't have a high school certificate.
Wow.
So it was,
Brilliant. But you've still done so well, Gerry, and So yeah, just give me a moment. I'm just gonna put this fan off so that it doesn't disturb the sound recording. Just 1 second.
okay.
Yeah, I think it was making a little bit of a sound. So we can continue from here. Oh, my hair is getting
Okay.
full. Let me manage without and wait for the AC to come on. Okay, we'll continue from here. So I'm going to cut that portion out.
Okay.
So Gerry, now my next question to you is, what were the hurdles that you faced from like friends, friends' moms and dads, and saying, Gerry, what is wrong with you? Why aren't you finishing your education? Why aren't you doing this? Because that's the normal trend in India, right, Gerry?
Yes.
So
It
how
is.
did you manage all that? How did you just say, screw it, man, I'm doing what I have to do?
Well, I think being somewhere else helped to a great extent. if I was still in Bangalore and still meeting everyone at Catholic Club and all that stuff, I think it would be pretty difficult. But still, I think there always was the expectation of, I mean, and I guess things through this date, I still get every now and then I'm in some circle or the other where people are aghast that I haven't finished my schooling. So I guess that stigma does exist in India, and initially I thought it didn't bother me and I'm fine without it and all those kind of things. But in the long run, it does get to be quite it gets to be quite oppressive at times, and sometimes it becomes especially when things aren't going well. I started thinking, maybe I should have just done this, or what am I thinking? And unfortunately, the way I dealt with most of that was to come up with an alternate reality when I was speaking to people, and especially when I was young, well, just starting my career and everything. There was a lot of stuff that I would just blurt out because it sounded good, and it was not necessarily true. I would bend stories around. I even, stuff that other people had done, I would say I've done it and stuff like that, but just to be able to be accepted.
Wow.
And that went on for a few years. And what I fortunately, and that's one of the reasons I eventually stopped television as well. I mean, things weren't going very well for me personally in my personal life. I was making a lot of wrong decisions. I had completely confused fame and significance. And I think the accolades and adulation that comes with something like that, at least I'm not built for it. So I finally woke up one day and realized that I never want to go back to that. And I don't even know how that happened, but it was a very sudden change in me, where I said, "Listen, this is not it. I don't want to be the guy who is living, this fictitious life or anything." And of all the work that, in fact, the time that I was working with National Geographic and in the limelight and even the spotlight in many places, was the time that I achieved the least in my entire life. So I was either working on, past laurels at that time, or stuff that wasn't really true. Um, so I left and I started working in education at that time, keeping my outdoor and wildlife base. So I worked on experiential education, and I started working with kids, and that sort of recharged me more than anything else, and it gave me a massive sense of purpose.
Wow.
I was able to see. I became very focused and driven about how bad our educational system is, because I related to that. I related to being judged. I related to not seeing the relevance of two dimensions in a textbook. Not seeing the relevance of expectations that the system has. And I've found that children could actually be so much more. And I think one of the fundamental stumbling blocks of our educational system is we don't treat our children like we truly believe in them. We always either cushioning everything for them, or giving them targets that are way too high to meet, or not allowing them to choose and face the consequences. So it's, I think, and also not really allowing them to discover. There's no point in especially in today's day and age where information is literally at your fingertips. There's no point relearning everything that's happened.
Right.
It's really important to help children learn how to learn, and be able to explore and be excited about learning, which doesn't exist in our educational system.
Wow.
So yeah. So then there was the education side of things. Sorry, what was that?
No, something like this, Gerry. How would we introduce it into the education system? Because I'm starting a school for greatness, so I'm very keen on how you just express things. How would we introduce this, and how would some kids find it?
We need to start at the primary school level, where children learn from doing things, but not just like do a project on Mohenjo-daro. It's not that kind of doing things. They need to have a purpose. And I learned a lot from reading this guy called Stephen Levy, and he was a fourth grade teacher in Boston.
Right.
And he wrote a book called Starting from Scratch as well. And every year, what he did is he got the children to choose a project that they would study, and everything, all the directives of the state would be taught through that project. So I experimented with that kind of work as well, where children from the time we built a pond, and the entire school, the kindergarten kids were learning estimation and playing with mud and looking at small mini beasts and all. And the middle school children were looking at geography, history, using water to get into language, all these kind of things. So it builds relevance into learning. And then things like the formulae and all that stuff aren't the end that you have to learn. They're just a means to an end, which make it a lot more simpler and much more relevant to children. And it it sort of surprises children what they can do when they're actually, when they want to do something, and they and it's not just delivered to them, but but the teacher or the educator needs to play a role of an enabler rather than a teller or a data transferer or any of those things.
Right.
Yeah. So just enable children to learn how it used to be earlier, when children was learn by themselves by being with their parents or the greater community or whatever.
Even the Gurukula system works on that.
It works very well. Yeah, exactly.
So even in training, Gerry, I call myself a facilitator rather than a trainer, because I'm saying
Yes.
I'm here to facilitate your learning.
Yes.
What do you want?
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that's a super.
But you have to be the one doing the learning. Yeah.
Yes, get kids to learn. I think if you can teach them how to learn, they'll learn whatever they need to. Particularly, like you said, Gerry, in my time, definitely there was no access to Google and all. Maybe British Council Library was one of the main storehouse for learning, and
Yes.
second to that was probably the school library.
Yeah.
So coming back to now this alternate career, do you feel that India is ready for alternate careers? Do you think parents should start to look at it differently? What is your general advice to people in India?
So I think I come from the standpoint that so I never thought of building a career. It was not. I never thought, okay, I'm going to go there and I'll become an assistant curator and then I'll go on to do something else. And it was never that. I was never thinking, and almost to a fault, I was never thinking ahead. But my goal was to be doing what I really wanted to do, and I sort of achieved that. And well, at least for the past 15, maybe 20 years now, I've really done just that. I've done what I wanted to do, and I've been able to say, listen, this is fine. If I have to do this for the next 1,000 days, I'm absolutely fine doing that, and I love it. And so it's I've I've I've, I've vehemently stayed away from anything that would be um, would would mean that, and I don't mean the small things. I don't mean doing things like the drab things and the mundane things about my work. I mean the big decisions. But so I've never been in a space in my adult life where I'm not okay getting up the next day and doing what I do. So and I think because of that, it's just slowly, and we make a living from it. And I'm happy doing that stuff. So today we live out on a farm here near Nagarole, and I've got one Russell's Viper telemetry project running. We're setting up a serpentarium to help with anti-venom production. With amongst the leaders now in the studies of venoms amongst the country, and we're doing a lot of education and outreach amongst the rural community. So and it's something that we go. It's not like I go out on a day of work and I come back and I'm like, oh God, I need a break. It's like, that's great. Let me have a beer. It's been a great day. We've worked with how many ever people in a panchayat, and some days it doesn't work like we planned and all that stuff. But the good thing is when our goals are so near, always just about reachable, we're able to we come back, and if it doesn't work, which all it means we go back to the drawing board. And I'm surrounded by fantastic people who are all committed to this, and there's no dearth of conversation because we're all on a similar wavelength and everything.
Right,
so
right.
I think I get a lot of energy and validation from my team who work with me. And I think that makes a big difference. Right now we are 5 people here. Yeah, 5 people here, working on the snakebite mitigation and management work, and and there's a couple of other collaborators as well. So total of in the team is about 10 who are doing all this work.
So this is actually helping save lives in a lot of ways, because the venom that
Yes,
you're producing, the information that you're giving villagers, you're
yes,
identifying snakes and the poisonous varieties, and we don't have to kill snakes just because we think all snakes are venomous. I mean, the kind
yes,
of work that you're doing is actually helping society.
yes. It's that's the bottom line. That's what we want to do. So we work from the premise that if people will be scared of snakes, and that's a prerogative, because especially here, I mean, if I speak to someone in the city, I'd say there's no need to be scared of snakes, but out here we're surrounded by a real risk of being bitten by a snake anytime. Yes, I mean, it's in within there, it's like crossing a road. So if you look and you're careful, you won't get hit, right? But people are unable to figure out exactly what they need to do and how not to get bitten. So there's been a lot of work done on all the other aspects of snake bites, but no one's ever looked at what the snake is doing in that place in the first place,
That's right.
and what increases the risk
Getting bitten.
of conflict.
Wow.
So that's what we're focusing on really, really tremendously here. And we've already got a lot of answers. We found on the ecology side, we found exactly what kind of place these snakes seem to prefer. On the venom side, we found that there are various regions in the country where the antivenom doesn't work very well. We've also found which companies' antivenoms don't work so well. So you can
No,
imagine we're
tell
not
me
very
about this.
popular.
Jerry, this is something really huge. Tell me
Yeah.
about it. What do you mean by this venom doesn't work in certain places?
So the antivenom basically is made from 4 species of snakes. So you take the venom from a snake and you put it into a large animal like a horse. You put a very tiny dose into a large animal like a horse or a mule. The horse then develops antibodies, and those antibodies are then harvested. So that's in a nutshell how antivenom is produced.
Right.
Now the problem with this is manifold in India, because we're such a large geography and it's a very diverse geography. So first problem being there are other snakes as well that cause. So aside from these 4 snakes, the spectacle cobra, the common krait, the Russell's viper, and the saw-scale viper. There are other snakes as well that are medically significant, which cause either death or damage in the hundreds. India, by the way, loses 50,000 people on average per year to
Wow.
snake bite.
Wow.
That's deaths. About 2 lakh people
1,000
suffer
people
what's
a
called a
week.
permanent loss of life function, which could be kidneys, which could be a limb, and it's a massive socioeconomic issue, because it's very poor and low-income group people who are bitten, and most often it's the breadwinners who get bitten. So it's a massive socioeconomic thing, and very few people have even looked at the aspect of what kind of psychological strain it is on survivors, because it is pretty much a near death experience for many people. It's like after an accident or after any form of trauma. So they've done some work in Nigeria and very little work in Sri Lanka, and they found that a lot of people actually fall into this depression after snake bite. So there's so many aspects that need to be tackled. The second problem with, and this is the much larger problem, the second problem with antivenom not working in different parts is a cobra in Chennai and a cobra in West Bengal can have a completely different venom. And yeah, and so
Wow.
both clinical data and the data that we've got from our research has shown that this is happening, and it's a massive problem. And unfortunately, we're still looking at a national level solution when we should be looking at this as many small countries working to sort their own snake bite issue.
And
So
that's
we should
what.
have at least 5 or 6 separate regions in the country that are operating on their snake bite issues.
How do you come across all this data? I mean, do you have a network of people who are working on this? Do you
Yes,
work with
there's
the
a few
government?
people working on this. Yeah, but also we've done a lot of work. So Ram, myself, and our collaborator in Indian Institute of Science, Dr. Karthik Sunagar, we've been studying venoms from different parts of the country. So we actually go to different parts of the country, catch snakes, extract venom, and bring it back to IISc. And we've been looking at the constitution of these venoms, the potency, and whether they are neutralized by current antivenoms, amongst a few other tests. But these are the fundamental ones. And we found that there's a massive, massive issue. But something as simple as in the Northeast and in the Andamans, for example, there are still snake bites and snake bite deaths, but none of these 4 species exist in those areas.
Oh, I see.
So yeah, and antivenom can't just be used. So we're even trying now to see if there's any cross specificity of antivenom that might work on these snakes from the Northeast and the Andamans. But so far the results are pretty dismal. So
you have to work with other medical, verticals as well, in terms of the health and even in terms of psychology. You just mentioned, what
exactly,
happens
yeah.
post a snake bite, near-death experience. Wow. So it's very complex. And so how do you wrap your head around all of this now, Gerry? Because this is such a vast field and such an untapped field.
Yes. So I think the key for us to continue to be effective is to not take it all on, but to collaborate with as many people as possible. So we're working in this landscape in Hunsur and the Mysore district. This is where most of our work is done, aside from some work in the Northeast. And then, of course, we're doing some venom collection in different parts of the country, but that's a very small ask on our time. Our focus is here in the district. And what we do is any data that we get that might help other people who we know who are doing other kinds of things. For example, if there's someone who's doing a socio-economic investigation in some part, we share all that data with them. And the only thing we ask for in return is information that will be relevant to our action plans here. But what we want to do is by 2025 is to have a model for a district where we brought snakebite death down to 0. And to give you an idea of how many people die from snake bites every year, just in our taluk, not even our district, in our taluk last year, 6 people died from snake bite. And we personally know 3 people who, personally because we met them and all, who have suffered loss of limb or very serious tissue damage. And all of them are in big trouble financially because of the thing. So it's
very sad.
Yeah, it's a massive issue.
Very sad. So I'm hoping now that some of this message actually gets out to people who could work with you, collaborate with you in some way. And, this idea of mind talks is also so that, we can see how basically we can help the country.
Yes.
And we want to create better leaders for India. And you're definitely one of the leaders, in a totally new space. And like you said, you're creating new paths all the time. Yes. So, I'm really grateful for you to share, because you shared all this information with us. One thing that I want you to also cover, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask some tangential questions now just to get into mind.
Sure.
Did you learn anything from snakes or reptiles that you feel, is similar to we as humans, and, we can sort of translate that information here and say, we can be better with humans because we learn from the animals?
I think that actually that is quite an easy question for me to answer, because one thing that I learned a lot from snakes is not from them being empathetic, but how to be empathetic. So initially when I used to handle snakes, I had a very subduing sort of approach to snakes. So I needed to, this is a dangerous animal, so I need to pin it down or hold it by the head. And, and there was a lot of that hullabaloo. It's sort of the kind of stuff you see on television, where everyone's like pinning a snake down, it's striking. But then I think what works for me now is to push the right buttons so that the snake doesn't want to bite me. And the only way I can do that.
Tell me that. This is really super.
Yeah. So basically snakes don't want to bite us, right? They only bite us when we make them bite.
Right. Because they're not food for the snake. Yeah.
Yes. And if you can approach snake handling empathetically, then you can make sure that you're reading the signs that the snake's giving you, and you're really listening to the snake and not making it cross that point where where it's fine. And nowadays, most of the snakes that I handle, like a cobra and all that stuff, they hardly even hood up. So and I feel that is, to be able to do that with a snake is, for one thing, far more gratifying than all the other, the snake version of wheelies on an RX 100.
Gerry, you're more or less like a snake whisperer, man, the way I look at it.
Well, they probably enjoy me whispering because they can't hear anyway. So, so but um, I think it's more about oneself. So when people handle snakes or when people interact, if you look at people who work with dogs, they're usually people who are much um, are at ease with themselves and are able to
That's right.
work better with an animal like a dog. And I think that working with animals in general, um, I think it does bring out about eventually. I mean, for whatever, for me at least, my journey was quite tumultuous. Where I was that young punk who thought the world of himself and blah blah blah. And but once I started letting animals actually teach me what there is to learn, there's every day is a learning experience with them. So I might have handled thousands of snakes, but every snake is still as valuable and um, as worthy of that effort and listening and everything that the previous snakes were.
So this is practically like a love with snakes. You're in love with snakes, if you ask me.
Yeah, all animals actually.
All animals, all animals. And why did
Yeah,
you
all
stick
animals. I
with
think I just specialized
reptiles?
in snakes. What was that?
Why would you stick? Why did you stick with reptiles? What was the draw for that?
Um, I think the mystery of them all. And initially, yes, I mean, the coolness definitely got to me. Uh, to be able to handle a cobra and everyone like, oh, wow, hey, shucks, be careful. Aren't you scared? All that. I mean, it's really garbage because it's no more dangerous than crossing a road or, driving from Bangalore to Mysore.
It's nice for
In
you
fact,
to
it's
say
probably less dangerous than driving from Bangalore to Mysore nowadays. But if you look at it, I mean, growing up, I saw all these construction workers on bamboo scaffolding, 7 stories high, tied together with jute rope,
Yeah.
no safety net whatsoever.
Yeah.
The work that they do is far more dangerous, and the skill that they require is much more. But for some reason, they don't get the accolades and the spotlight. And the only reason that snake handling or wrangling, as many people call it, gets that spotlight is because of everyone else's stigma towards it. It's not that big a deal. If you can learn how to play a piano, you can learn how to handle a snake. And I think I think that's one of the fundamental changes that industry leaders need to make. When I think what we like to do is we like to be cool, and but what it really needs to be is something much more intrinsic. And I think I started my change, and I think my biggest growth happened when I stopped looking for validation from everywhere else and everyone else, and I started looking for everything that could come from within. So, but yeah, a lot of mistakes were already made, but yeah, hopefully I'll balance out those scales in time.
I think you're such a cool guy, Gerry, and I'm just so enamored by you and what work you have done. I also see your posts, and in fact, you're so kind to even send them to me for these kids sessions, with reptiles and snakes and all that. Give us something about that so that more people can understand this. Why do you do it, or how can they benefit from it?
Well, the reason I do that, there's 2 reasons I do that. Um, First is, of course, it gives us sustenance. But I think more importantly, um, I feel that children are affected and influenced a lot by what they see in the media and on television and everything. And I think it would have behooved my learning a lot if I had someone who actually brought down the entire energy and made it much more matter of fact and helped actual learning and made things about the animals themselves rather than about the people who are doing stuff with the animals. And you'd be amazed how much. I mean, children are truly um, not just the ones who are interested in fields like this, but even others. They just lap it up. They love they love learning about these things. They enjoy being wrong about stuff. Like, really, I didn't know that, and all kinds of stuff. Oh, but my mother said this, and my dad said that, and then it's just so much. They're just so excited about this being something that is not so alien.
Right.
And I think they also, I think a lot of children today are very excited about the prospect of getting into a field like this because and that's really heartening because I mean, When I was a kid, there was no such prospect.
There was
So,
no, yeah, nothing.
uh,
Yeah, that's right. So that's why I'm saying you're a pioneer in so many ways. So many ways. So, no, when I'm looking at people like Bear Grylls,
mhm.
or who's this guy, the crocodile hunter? Uh,
Steve Irwin.
yes, Stewart.
Yeah.
I mean, I used to be enamored by his programs and watch it on Animal Planet and all that. I mean, that it seems so good because I know these guys get paid that much of money for that.
Yeah.
So, and you're saying no, no. I mean, I'm not for TV, and all that.
Well,
Why is that?
I think fundamentally because TV requires me to be someone who I'm not, and I can't do that. So if they filmed me handling a cobra, it'll be very boring because the cobra won't strike at me. It'll probably not hood up. I
Oh,
won't
they
go
want that. They
jumping
want the
around the place.
drama.
Blah, blah. Yeah,
Hmm.
and also Bear Grylls. Just I mean to set the record straight, his idea of survival is more like toying with suicide. You don't need to do all those things to survive safely in the wild. In fact, it's better not to. And Steve Irwin, I think it was more about him than about the animals. And I mean, he got stung by, um, sadly, got stung by a
Stingray.
stingray.
Stingray, yeah.
But a stingray is a very peaceful animal. It is a very peaceful animal. So it means that
They
you're
must have
pushing the
done
wrong button.
something like to film
Yeah,
it
exactly.
in its
Yeah.
wild kind of, yeah, yeah. You're right.
So, um,
So
yeah.
principally, you're
So
against that.
there's very few earnest uh, presenters, um, and it's not easy to be one of those. And you need a network that will be okay with that. And especially today, those networks don't really exist.
So you're saying if a network could actually capture it in reality rather than create the drama and the hype around it,
Yes.
you'd be okay with it.
And they completely bend reality as well.
That's
Uh,
right.
so right now, I mean, there's so many shows. I mean, kids keep telling me about these shows, and then I look them up, and because I don't, I mean, we don't even have a television connection here, which is wonderful. Um, but the kids will tell me about something or the other, and they'll say, he did this and he did that, and I'm like, oh God, it's so terrible. And I mean, through 4 sessions of our classes, kids are suddenly, oh gosh, why did you do that? It would have been so painful for the snake. Oh, this. And then, so from the first couple of classes, they'll be like, singing their praises, and then they'll be critical of it. And if that's all they need to be really, just be critical of something. Don't, I think anything we need to question ourselves foremost, and then everything else that we see around us. Especially in today's day and age, with all the social and political climates that are around, we need to be able to constantly question everything and come up
It's the
with
reality.
answers that we're comfortable with.
Yeah. So just before I close, Gerry, I wanted to ask you just two more questions.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, is there a wish list for Gerry? That's the first question. And the
Okay.
second question, is there something that we could do for you? I mean, could they get this information out? Are you looking at sponsors? I don't know, whatever. Just say whatever's on top of your mind.
Okay. Uh, to be honest, there is a wish list, and the wish list is one of actually tuning down a lot. Um, so I would love to make bread, brew beer, and fish, but I haven't had a holiday for a long time. Um, also, I think it's not possible to take a holiday when you know that hundreds of people are dying every day. So you need to work double time, but it'll come soon. And then I would like to, and that's why we're focusing so much on building our team, because that will also enable me to, yeah, be the cook
Vaccine.
and
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Um, and as for, I mean, the more people that are on board, the better. There's a lot of work to be done, and we need all kinds of skills that we don't have. Skills in design, skills in writing copy, skills in education. Um, we will be looking for sponsors at some point or the other. Until now, we've funded ourselves, but now with the scope growing much bigger than just here, we will need sponsors as well. So yeah, and we constantly reach out to folks, and we'll once we're clear of COVID, we will also open our space up again for more and more people to come and
Sure.
work with us and intern and things like that.
Fabulous. Gerry, it's been such a pleasure talking to you, and I picked up a lot of nice pointers from you. I
Thanks, Ian.
really like the aspect of what you learned from the snakes, and you're saying we can use this in humans also. The empathy
Yes,
part of it, and a
yes,
snake is not basically a violent creature. It doesn't really want to kill you.
yes,
You're not food for the snake. I mean, that's the first thing I learned that on one of the National Geographic channels.
yes,
And that's why I'm
yeah.
saying I need Gerry to be out there so that more people can learn from you. Particularly the extrapolations that you do, the bridges that you create out of the
Okay.
learning. I think that's
Yes,
fabulous. You got such a nice heart, Gerry. You got such a nice
thanks.
heart. I love the way you stayed on your path. I love the way you're still motivating people. I love the earnestness with which you do your programs for the kids. And even the flyers that you send is so beautiful. And I really
Thank you.
wish more people understood that there's education even in something like this. And we can learn so many life principles just by staying in the jungle and watching the animals.
Absolutely. We can get learning from everything. Like I said, you can get learning from crossing a road as well.
Yes.
So,
And your analogy that it's more dangerous to be on a scaffolding than it is to, catch a snake. And, I think
yeah.
it's much safer playing with the snakes or catching snakes than doing some of the other things that happen around us,
Yes.
crossing the road. Like. Hey, thanks very much, Gerry. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Feel free to call anytime, and I'm going to send you a video to you so that you can, use this somewhere. I don't know where, but
Yeah.
I hope more people see this, and I hope more people listen to the story that you just shared, and start to do something about it. Particularly those in government, and you're saving lives on the thousands of people through the anti-venom, and I really hope
Yeah.
more lives could be saved. 50,000 lives to lose, plus maiming and other things.
Yes.
I think it's really sad. But thank you for the work you're doing. And on behalf of a lot of people, I'm going to say thank you to you, Gerry. And more power to
Thanks
you and to
a
your
lot,
work.
Ian.
All the best.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.